Well, Dr. Connor McDonnell is an anesthesiologist at SickKids in Toronto, and outside of his day job, he writes poetry and also researches and lectures on the opioid crisis and medication safety.
Dr. McDonnell is out with a new book today that explores how language can illuminate the complexities of both medicine and the human experience. It's called What We Know So Far. And Dr. McDonnell joins us live now. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
I understand that you've spent over 3 decades researching opioid crisis and medication safety. And this new book is really kind of a lot of poetry. You say an 80-page poem. Before we get to it, I want to talk about the misconceptions that are out there about opioid addiction and overdoses.
Sure. I guess a different understanding came about with this in the opioid crisis when it really came to the fore about 10, 12 years ago. Our social kind of picture of opioids, addicts, was heroin, things like that, people on the streets. But when you had the whole Purdue OxyContin problem that came along, and a lot of, there was a huge clampdown on prescribing of opioids, what you started to see was a lot of people who were on large doses on a daily basis just to function. So people with very physical jobs and not a lot of health care. Those people all of a sudden had to go elsewhere to get their medications, and that's why you started to see a rise in things like OxyContin, heroin. And then for me, probably the most surprising thing was, as an anaesthetist who's used medications like fentanyl for 30 years now, to start seeing people dying on the streets from drugs that had fentanyl in them. And at the time, I couldn't work out, like, why would people be buying fentanyl? But of course, it was drugs like cannabis, cocaine, etc. They were actually, fentanyl was being added to those to actually increase the high, as it were, because they couldn't sell them any cheaper, so all they could do was make the drug more desirable.
Right.
And so for me and for my colleagues at SickKids, we started to kind of think, you know what, while we don't have many children, even teenagers who are drug addicts or are on the streets as drug addicts, there is still a certain responsibility to make sure that prescribed drugs don't kind of pour out into the community and then stay there unused, because obviously they remain as a risk in the home. If one of you has wisdom teeth out, goes home with 40 tablets, takes 2, and there's 38 tablets there still 2 years later.
No doubt about that. Doctor, I find you to be an interesting sort of contrast and perhaps stereotypes. You know, you think of doctors in some cases as being kind of cold and calculating and just doing what needs to be done in the moment to save a life. I don't mean that offensively at all. I mean that quite truly. But then the poetic side, the introspective, way of using language to talk about issues that can affect people. You've been writing poetry for years, but now you've got an 80-page book, one poem. How does that come about, in your mind? Like, it deals with your work, but it deals with something you're clearly passionate about. I'm intrigued by the two sides of your brain almost that come together and do this.
That's a great question, actually. I write with my left hand, I do everything else with my right hand, so both sides of my brain are always going. Actually, it's interesting, I didn't raise my eyebrows to the cold calculating, because sometimes in those moments you do have to be, but I think actually, and I hadn't thought about this before till you said that, Nick, but I think the book and the poetry contains the inner monologue. The anxiety, the fear, in the moment you do the thing, and it either works or it doesn't. And of course, at SickKids, it usually does work. But afterwards, there's still an aftermath. Even if it's a positive outcome, it might have been a very fraught engagement. It might have been something that's terrifying. A lot of people who work in SickKids, they have children the same age, shape and size as kids right in front of them in hospital beds and operating tables. So there has always been, for me, a significant inner monologue going on that is usually one of some form of anxiety, but some form of, don't mess this up. This is somebody's precious cargo that they've given to you to take care of for a while. And while we might do 20, 25,000 operations a year, and I don't know how many anesthetics I've done in my career at this point, but each time you do it, it's that one time for that one family, usually. And so I found that the more that I didn't talk about these kind of things, the more anxious I became, and the more concerned I was for not so much my ability to do my job, but how much longer I could do my job without it having negative effects on me. And one of the kind of wellness, better mental health activities I took was I started taking some writing programs and courses in the U of T maybe 12, 15 years ago with an ICU nurse, actually.
Interesting.
And I just stuck with it, and people told me to stick with it. And I very much divorced myself from writing about medicine or about being a doctor for the longest time because I didn't want to trade on that. And then I just found that it was another way of compartmentalizing myself that wasn't particularly good for mental health. So as I was embracing all facets of myself at work, I decided to start doing so in my writing as well. And I found that as soon as I started doing that, my writing was taking me to a place of addiction at times, anxiety, as you first asked, the kind of misapprehensions about drugs and addiction and things like that. And I've lost people, I've lost friends, we've had family members with severe addiction. And it felt like a very weird position for me to occupy, to be giving a syringe of a drug to a 500 gram baby, while somebody on the street is actually dying from that drug while smoking a joint. And that ridiculous kind of paradox just really spoke to me. And I think at the same time I started writing more and more about these kind of things, but also with my colleagues, with Monica Caldera at SickKids, we actually started doing some major research into how can we minimize opioids leaving our hospital. Essentially opioid stewardship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Well, Dr. Conor McDonnell, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this. I hope people read this book. I know winter months are coming, and as the temperature gets cold, opioid overdoses increase. So, I hope that you can change some lives with your book. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so
Appreciate this,
much.
Doctor. Nice to meet
you
you this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.